Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming, and welcome back to our read-through of Vigilant, the Scarred Lands novel. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who left a comment on the previous video in this series. Your feedback is both invaluable and heartening. It's comments like the ones you've been leaving that really give us, well, food for thought, quite frankly, when it comes to us embarking on audio projects such as this one and doing audiobooks of our other works. So, sincerely, my thanks to you, our thanks to you, and please, normally I would ask you to share this video, but as the previous one is the first chapter of the book, the prologue, I recommend continuing to share that video widely among whatever circles you happen to frequent that love fantasy, love fiction, love role-playing games, because we need more feedback. We're greedy like that. Also, if you happen to prefer a version you can just listen to and that you don't need to watch, if you check the descriptions of these videos, you will find a link to the MP3 of these videos without all of this introductory blurb. So you can just listen to the novel all the way through as and when it gets uploaded. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Chapter 1. 2 years earlier, AV 148, the third char day of Corro. Earcade took a deep breath and stepped up to the city guard standing before the gate. "State your business," the guard rumbled. "I'm here to join the Vigilance." The guard raised an eyebrow under his metal helm. "Oh, really? Where are you from?" Earcade swallowed hard, but kept looking the guard in the eyes. "South." The guard grunted. "I see. Well, you'll want the Hall of Command, then. Go to the compound up on that hill there. Big manor house. You can't miss it. Good luck, and welcome to Lave." Earcade nodded to the guard and stepped past him through the gate. That was easier than I expected. Someone coming from the Calastian hegemony, a sworn enemy of the Veshian Vigil, might well face arrest, not directions to the Vigil's heart itself. The broad street was crowded, and Earcade's eyes widened as he walked. There were people of all kinds. The majority were human, men, women, children, some with carts or on horseback, others walking like himself. There were also other races, elves, halflings, even the occasional dwarf and orc. More people thronged this one street than he had ever seen before in one place. Farmers, hunters, soldiers, and merchants did their own obvious business of the day, but most people carried no tools or weapons to make clear what they were about. Earcade tried not to stare, at least not too much, and bent his shoulders, sinking into his cloak and taking a protective grip on the great bow slung across his back. He had worried that his dark complexion would make him stand out, though he had the blue eyes of a northerner. Yet no one took particular notice of him until a short man stepped in front of him, carrying a large tray mounted with food that hung in front of him by a strap around his neck. "Pastry? Only a copper? Or a meat pie for 3? Earcade stopped. No, his stomach, empty since the night before, betrayed him loudly. "Wait, hold on." Earcade pulled out his money pouch, tucked and tied inside his breeches and well hidden, as his mother had suggested, to protect it from pickpockets. Only 2 gold coins remain inside, plus a scattering of silver and copper. He pulled out a copper and replaced the pouch. "Just a pastry, please." The food seller took the coin. The hawkish face of King Verduk, the black dragon of Calastia, glared up from the coin in judgment. Earcade tensed. The pastry seller didn't seem to notice, and dropped the coin in a cup with one hand while passing Earcade a pastry with the other. "It's got grape jam in it," he said, and moved brightly on to a new customer. Earcade nibbled the pastry as he walked toward the centre of the city. Grapes? But they're for making wine. It was sweet and tasty, if a bit sticky. He licked his fingers after he finished, but they still felt mucky. What if the Home Commander wants to shake my hand or something? His forehead knotted. Do they even shake hands in Vesh? He walked on, marvelling a little at the architecture of the city. All the buildings were at least 2 stories tall, some as high as 4. Most had walls of granite. Back home, just the temple and granary were made of stone, and only the granary stood taller than 15 feet. Even the road here was made of stone, large square blocks that the horses' hooves clacked on as they trotted past. His wonderment continued. The road led into a square at least 100 feet across, full of marble benches and shaded awnings and sprinkled with podiums. Well-dressed men and women gathered in groups, chatting and gesturing, arguing and whispering. Earcade spoke Lydian, the trading tongue common to most of Gelsbad, fluently, but was still learning the local Veshian dialect, and he heard many words that he did not understand. His well-worn cloak and road dust were as distinct here as a pigeon's feathers among peacocks. Earcade shyly skirted the edge of the square. The gurgle of water floated on the air. He followed it to a fountain at the grand square's far end. A marble statue of the goddess Tanil stood on a granite boulder in the fountain's flow, gazing out over the crowd. Wild animals rendered in the same dark stone drank calmly at her feet. Earcade sat on the granite edge. Sunlight glowed in the translucent stone of the statue, as if Tanil might turn and look him in the eye. A bull elk, frozen in mid-sip, stood close enough to touch. The assembled gentlemen and ladies took no notice of him. He dipped his hands in the water, scrubbing the goo and grime away in the pool. Hands clean, he readjusted his pack and bow and made his way toward the hill. The streets narrowed. Tightly packed buildings gave way to walled gardens. A wide, well-used dirt path wound up the hill, bordered by poles topped with brass lanterns. Earcade made his way up. Leather-clad men and women of various races strode by. They took no notice of him, either chatting with each other or keeping to themselves. Most wore cloaks of brown, green, or grey. Many wore amber medallions. Vigilance. The path ended before a large multi-story building of cunningly fitted stone, with walkways on the roof and archers' blinds where soldiers could hold off an attack. A brick walk led up to the large double doors at the front. Earcade stared up, his heart thudding in his chest. The walls towered over him. The doors themselves were of heavier wood than the walls of the house he'd grown up in. The entire structure gave an air of history and grandeur. One of the doors swung out, gliding on well-oiled hinges. Two rangers stepped out, laughing with each other. The trailing one noticed Earcade, nodded to him, and held the door open. Earcade realized he'd been holding his breath and exhaled. "Thank you," he murmured, stepping through the door. The elegant entry hall's floor of polished hardwood shone with wax. Earcade carefully stepped around the large, woven, dark green rug, mindful of the grime of a month-long journey on his boots. Before him, a grand staircase led up to the second floor. Archways of carved and gleaming wood framed the entrances to foyers on his left and right. Voices in Veshian echoed faintly from the left archway. Earcade glanced between the archway and the stairs. No signs beckoned, and no guards appeared to direct him. As he waited, he undid the leather thongs of his boots, careful not to shake off too much dust as he removed them. "Can I help you?" asked a voice from the archway to his right. A young woman in servant's dress looked him up and down, tapping a finger on her lips. Earcade stammered, "I'd like to join the vigilance." "I see," she said. She glanced at his feet. "I don't want to track in any mud." She smiled. "How thoughtful." Then she turned, beckoning him after her. Carrying his boots, Earcade followed the servant through the right-hand archway into the foyer, leaving the voices behind. Well-worn antique chairs and tables cluttered the room. Rugs of fur from exotic creatures covered the floor, and thick tapestries adorned the walls. "Make yourself comfortable while I see if someone is available to speak with you." She gestured to a coat room nearly as large as his brother's bedroom at home. "You may hang your cloak and things in the closet there, including your pack. They'll be safe with us. Here's a brush for your boots." Then she pointed to a smaller door opposite the coat room, "And behind this door is a water closet, should you require it." Earcade blinked. "Powder room?" the maid replied. "Rest room?" She paused, then whispered, "Shitter?" Earcade laughed. "Toilet!" The maiden smiled. "We've got indoor plumbing. It's all very fancy." "Yes, thank you. I'm Earcade, by the way. Earcade Linnair." "Oh, and I'm Perazia. Pleased to meet you, Earcade Linnair. We shouldn't need to wait long." She made a small curtsy and departed down a hallway further into the manor. Earcade hung his things in the coat room, keeping only his bow. He brushed his boots off on the coat room mat and pulled them back on. Then he sat down in an overstuffed chair in a corner of the foyer and looked thoughtfully around the irregularly shaped room. Sunlight filtered in through white curtains that billowed at the open window. Earcade studied the room's sumptuous tapestries. A towering man in armour hammered on an anvil the size of a house. The goddess Tanil, dressed in woodsman's leathers, rested her hands on two bears that lay at her feet like hounds. But in the one nearest to him, the goddess Madriel, the Redeemer, showed her gentle countenance. She stood atop a hill, her wings shining white except for the peacock feathers stretching out behind her. She held her flaming spear above her head, where warm rays of sunlight glowed, driving away dark clouds. In his mind, Earcade heard his mother intoning the morning prayer, smelled the garden earth around the hidden shrine at home. Voices in Veshian came from the entryway. Earcade heard and caught a handful of words, some numbers, and most definitely the word Slytherin. Ratmen. Two men entered the room. The older man wore ranger's armour, but of soft fabrics and fine stitchwork, wealthy, but not ostentatious. The one speaking was an elf dressed in vestments and leathers, a cleric of some kind. Neither took notice of Earcade as they crossed the room and continued down the hall. They definitely mentioned Slytherin, so the stories of vigilance fighting ratmen are true. Good. He smiled grimly, and returned to studying the tapestry. How did they get all those colours in her wings? It's made of thread, but it looks painted. Earcade Lunaire. Earcade nearly jumped out of his own skin. A sun-darkened, strong-jawed man stood only inches behind him. Earcade nodded. I'm Trophion, the Home Commander's Major Domo. Please follow me. Earcade picked up the bow and followed Trophion down the hall and around the corner. The Major Domo walked with a noticeable limp, but Earcade could still hear his own quiet footfalls over Trophion's cat-like steps. The man held his right hand a little stiffly behind him. Earcade noticed that his two smallest fingers ended in scars at the second knuckle. They entered a windowless room dominated by a large oak desk. Shelves of books and scrolls covered the walls. Sitting behind the desk, a nondescript man pored over a ledger. He barely glanced up as he dipped a quill in ink and said, Please have a seat. Trophion, can you please stay? This shouldn't take long. Earcade sat in a chair on the near side of the desk. The Major Domo remained in the doorway. Please spell your full name and your town of origin, instructed the clerk. Earcade, E-O-C-H-A-I-D, Loren, L-O-R-E-N, Lunaire, L-E-N-A-H-R. I'm from the village of Trela, T-R-E-L-A. It's in New Veneer. Clark looked up from his writing. New Veneer? That's unusual. Venerians all worship Belsameth the Slayer. What under Tanil's eye would move you to join the Veshian Vigil? Earcade hesitated and looked down at his lap. We didn't... Son, speak up, you what? Earcade looked up at the clerk. It was then that he noticed the man wore a lacquered pin on his shirt, a bow, symbol of the goddess Tanil. He remembered the tapestry in the hall, the clerk's oath. We did not worship Belsameth. The clerk gestured with his quill. Go on. My mother is a devout Madrielite. Earcade's voice steadied. We have a secret shrine. We always worry the priests of Belsameth will find it, but they never have. I see. So you came to Vesh to get away from persecution? Earcade shrugged. Worshipping Madriel isn't illegal, but the Belsamites would have given us trouble if they knew. Then why join the Veshian Vigil? My grandfather was a vigilant, on my mother's side. His name was Iaku Irem. I'm named after him. The clerk raised an eyebrow and flipped back his ledger. What vigil was your grandfather part of? I don't know. He and my grandmother died over 20 years ago. I don't know much about him, only what my mother told me. Do you know when your grandfather left the vigil? Earcade shook his head. No, but it was before my mother was born. She was 19 when she had me, so she's about 44 now, at least 45 years ago. The clerk sighed. That will take some time to find, then. Trophion, I think the Home Commander will want to speak to this one. I'll see if he's available, Trophion said. He left the office, leaving Earcade alone with the clerk, who stood up and scanned over the bindings of various books on the shelf, occasionally pulling one out to read the cover and return it. "You've given me a challenge today," the clerk muttered. He thumped a heavy volume down and turned the pages, squinting. Earcade sat still as the clerk pulled down several more books. The man took no further notice of him. After long minutes, Trophion returned. "The Home Commander is available to see him. Keep hunting for those records." "Will do," said the clerk, and waved Earcade toward the doors, with ink-stained fingers, eyes still locked on the text before him. Earcade stood up and followed the major domo further into the manor house. At the end of a hall, they entered a huge room with one whole wall entirely made of windows, their glass shot through with flecks of mica. Sunlight spangling off the chips streamed through and glinted in the golden wood of a massive table. At the table's end sat the two men who had walked past Earcade earlier, the older man at the head of the table, and the cleric sitting at his left hand. "Please sit," said the older man, speaking in unaccented Lydian. Earcade took the nearest seat, a couple of chairs down from the older gentleman. "Thank you, sir. I'm Home Commander Calamis Dern. This is Irem, a priest of the Huntress. Trophion tells us that you hail from New Veneer and that you wish to join the Veshian Vigil. I'm curious about the sort of man who travelled all this way to serve our country." "I'm from the village of Trailer. It's a border town on the river between New Veneer and Legeni, in the very north end of the country. We're right on the edge of the Blood Steppes." The Home Commander shook his head. "Tell me about you, not where you're from." Earcade paused, shifted in his seat, and tried again. "I'm a hunter, trapper mostly. I've been taking care of my family since my father died." "Who's taking care of them with you away?" Earcade stiffened, a frown tugging his mouth. He stilled it and answered politely. "They're taking care of each other. My younger brother's a hunter too, and quite capable of earning money by it. There's other local hunters that he's been training with. Between that and our farm they'll do well, and my mum can handle herself." The Home Commander nodded and gestured to Earcade's bow. "Fine-looking bow for a young archer." Earcade blushed. "I'm okay. Not as good as my father. I'm hoping to get better. Stronger." "May I see it?" Earcade laid the bow on the table in front of the Home Commander with a tiny rattle of wood on wood. Dern picked it up and turned it expertly in his calloused hands. "An elven longbow." A light of pleasure graced the Home Commander's eyes. He flexed the wood gently. "Hell of a draw. Magical?" he asked the cleric. The elven man gestured over the bow and then shook his head. "But masterwork nevertheless." Calamis Dern glanced back over Earcade's small frame. "You can draw this?" "No, sir, but I'm learning, and I can use an ordinary bow well enough. As I said, I'm more of a trapper. It's my father's bow. I'm trying to learn it." "I see," Dern nodded. He laid the bow down gently and leaned towards Earcade. "How did your father die?" Earcade inhaled against the stab of pain, the memory still forever fresh, the blood in his mind's eye still a vivid red, the musk and dank fur still stinking. "Rat men, sir, killed and eaten by Slytherin on the Blood Steppes. I was hardly more than a kid. I couldn't save him." Dern's eyebrows knotted. His gaze felt heavy, looking deep into Earcade's eyes, considering him almost a moment, almost as if he could see his memories and judge their truth. Then the Home Commander bent his head. "So you want to fight Slytherin, is that it?" "I want to protect my family, and destroy the things that would hurt them," Earcade retorted. "I'm hoping the Vigil will teach me how." Dern frowned. "Understand, we don't give training without merit, and if you should earn your medallion, you're joining the Veshian Vigil for life. I'm not just kitting you up to run back to the Blood Steppes and hunt those verminous Titan spawn around your own village." "A life's what I'm looking for, sir," Earcade said. "It was this or be conscripted by the Calastians." The Home Commander raised an eyebrow. "Conscripted?" "Prince Erlis kept them out, but he's since given up. They're in the capital now, taking able-bodied commoners and sending them to fight in Darova. It was a matter of time before they reached us in Trailer." A cough sounded from the doorway. The clerk, a dusty tome in his hands, stood at attention. "Home Commander, I believe I found the relevant record for Linnaeus' grandfather," he said, walking to the table and opening the book. He traced a careful finger down a long column of handwritten entries, tapping at a paragraph in Bislis business-like script. Calamus Dern read. Earcade struggled to resist leaning in himself. The Home Commander pursed his lips and glanced at the cleric, who raised his eyebrows and nodded approval. The Home Commander laughed. Protecting people, you said? Well, recruit, we've had others join for less, and if you want Slytherin to fight, I dare say you'll have them. But think carefully. By joining us, you make yourself an enemy of New Veneer. I understand, sir, Earcade said. I have no loyalty to New Veneer. I'm hoping once I establish myself that I can move my family north to Vesh. My brother deserves better than dying for Calastia. In Veshian, the Home Commander asked, How's your Veshian? Earcade paused and replied slowly, I know a little words. I'm still learn? The Home Commander chuckled and reverted to Lydian again. It sounds like you have a lot to still learn, but that's fine. Trophion, get him an escort to the barracks, and deliver a message to the sergeant that he's to find out what this young man can do, and sign him up for language classes. Earcade gasped in amazement. So I'm in? I'm going to be a vigilant? The Home Commander shook his head. We'll see. You join the recruits for now. Whether you prove yourself and earn a medallion is a different story. Thank you very much for watching.